Okay, so we are getting started with our woven wheels. I'm going to start with our white color. You're just going to do all 3 woven wheels. It doesn't necessarily have an exact order that the woven wheels would be better or worse to go in, so just go in whatever order, start with whichever one you'd like. So for your woven wheels, if you have the kit, you're going to have pre-cut thread, which is cut into a double length. So you are just going to thread 6 strands and then tie your ends together into a knot. And then you're going to take your needle and take it to halfway. And that's called your folded over. We talked a bit about that in the intro to getting started. And this is that. It's the double up. I'm doubling up 6 strands because you have to create 12 for your kit, for your woven wheels. So I've created a knot in the end. I'm just gonna double knot that because we are starting our woven wheels first, which means there's nothing else to anchor our stitches back there. So I'm gonna do double knot, I'm gonna trim it up. And then as you can see, the hole in the center here is ginormous. So we're not gonna be starting with that hole. We're gonna start with an outside hole and stitch to the center. And that's gonna hold our knot. And then we're just gonna start stitching our spokes. So, actually, I didn't. This hole here, you could stitch your spoke starting there and then just do the inner part if you'd like, and then stitch the rest of your spoke after. I'm just gonna use that one to come up when I need more floss. That's just a personal preference. You could start with that one and just do your spokes halfway, but I think it potentially breaks your woven wheel up a bit by having the spoke not, I accidentally went through the wrong one. And I fix that. So yeah, and typically when we do a woven wheel on fabric, we obviously don't have like a halfway point, but in this case, because we know we're gonna have to get more thread, this is a very large knot woven wheel, I've made a hole there so that you can stop halfway through and get more thread. So because I just went down through that middle hole, you will have to do like a little anchor. So I'm just gonna thread my thread underneath of the stitches, and just to be sure, I'm gonna go through the loop. Oops, I am just struggling. Through the loop, we're gonna get caught on the outside of this so many times. And then just create kind of, not like a knot, but just an anchor so that the thread doesn't come straight back out of that hole because you just went down it. So it just kind of prevents it from pulling back. Okay, and then now I'm at the front of my woven wheel and I can just start doing my around the clock over under pattern. So I like to leave, like when I create my stitches, I don't want these too tight because there's not any give to wood. So when you're going underneath those, you need to have a little bit of space so that you can get underneath of it. So don't worry about getting the spokes too tight. And then I'm just gonna start. When you have the rest of your woven wheels, the hardest woven wheel, I went starting off with a bang. I went through one of the strands. When you start, the first woven wheel is the easiest. The second is okay, and then the third one is a bit of a struggle. So when you're going around on the third one, you're gonna have the hardest time around this curve of your woven wheel, or this curve of your woven wheel, because that's where your other stitches are gonna be, like your other woven wheels are gonna be. So getting underneath of here is gonna be sometimes hard. My suggestion, and I'll kind of show you as I go through here. So for the woven wheel, you're going under the first spoke, over the next, and then it's really just that pattern all the way around. So you can imagine that when you're sticking your needle underneath and there's a woven wheel, say right here, it can be a little to get past it. Getting caught on a lot of things on this one. I'm going through my spokes quite a bit. So we're just going over, under, and over, under, and just watching that like I'm not getting hooked on stuff and the tension gets all wonky. Taking those strands and just following it around. And as you get to areas where it's condensed, I typically, what I'll do is I try to get my needle underneath and then I try to push up on the bottom so that I can wedge my fingers underneath to pull it up so that I can lift it out. Another thing that I've done before is I use like something like to wedge underneath of the needle to pull it up so that it's easier for me to grab it. Because right now what I'm doing is I'm sliding my thumb along it to get it, to pull it through. But when there's another woven wheel in that space, you're gonna have a harder time doing that. And so some of those tricks are gonna be like angling it to try to maneuver it in the direction you want it so that you can grab it. That's the reason that we do the woven wheels first, so that there's no other obstacles, because the other two woven wheels are enough obstacles. So we're just flowing around. And then as far as tension goes, when you're doing a woven wheel, for these ones, tend to pull it quite secure because it is such a large woven wheel, especially in the center part. So now that I've really made a nice secure center, I'm gonna start to like ease up a little bit on my tension, just until I feel the resistance of it like being butted up against. Like I'm not pulling any slack out, I'm leaving a little bit so that it starts to come out. Oops, sorry, you're out of frame. One thing I'll say is that if you do end up getting the loop caught on the outside, it can sometimes change the tension. So if I get caught here and I'm pulling and I yank, it could mess up like the whole outside. So just being careful that if you see, like watching to make sure that piece isn't caught before it happens, and then pulling quite slowly. And then just slow and steady, watching the loop. So like for example, right here, if this one was done and I was coming underneath, you can see the trajectory of my needle is gonna go straight into that woven wheel, and that's not what I want. So what I would do is I would turn so that I could turn my needle in this direction to try to pull it out the side, which wouldn't be my normal recommendation for the way you should angle your needle when you're doing a woven wheel. But when you are working with this kind of wood and these kind of other woven wheels, you gotta do what you gotta do. So it's always gonna be like one specific side of the wheel when you're on that last one that you're gonna have the most trouble with. The alternative is, there isn't really an alternative actually. I was gonna try to make a suggestion, but I just realized that won't work, so ignore me. Just patience. The alternative is patience. So angling the needle. And then I'm getting towards the end of this. I am still gonna keep going even though I've kind of overlapped where my down hole is. I'm gonna just keep going because I want to use up all the thread. I don't wanna stop. Just because I'm at that hole, I want to use the thread. And then I'm at a spot now where it's probably a good time to push down. I have to dig a little bit underneath, but that's okay. And then I just push my needle through, probably when I needed to go when I had enough to be able to do this. So I'm gonna go through here to anchor this, through here, and then back around. I'm just trying to like give it a good like snug anchoring. And since I didn't leave quite enough to do it through the loop, 2 times around is enough to secure it. There's not a lot of tension on these, so it'll hold like that. But if you can get it with the loop, it's obviously a little better. Okay, and then I'm gonna take one more strand if you have the kit. And if you don't have the kit, you're taking 2 arms length and doubling them up and then giving it a cut and then threading one end and tying the 2 ends together. So I'm gonna thread this. Oops, if I can. I'm also about to sneeze, so. Okay, I think I got it. Just more difficult than normal. Okay, so I'm gonna hold those 2 ends together while I slide my needle down to the center. Try to unfold that or untangle that as I go. And then tying my big old knot in the end. This one actually you don't need as big of a knot because you're gonna be going up through the same hole that you went down through to restart. And it's because there's already stuff in it, it'll hold the knot. So when we're coming back up, you wanna watch because you're gonna be coming up where your wheel was. So what I am gonna do is I'm gonna push back. I'm gonna push my woven wheel out of the way to get my needle back up. And now you're like, oh no, you ruined your woven wheel. I didn't really, as long as I didn't just push on it so hard and destroy it, it's fine. So we're just gonna keep going on our sequence. I think when I went down, I kind of changed the sequence because I went under right here and then I would have gone over this one. So I'm actually gonna go under the next one, even though it technically looks like I've gone under 2. I should have gone over that one. So I'm gonna try to make it stay sort of on the same pattern so that it's not noticeable. So again, in this case where I said I would have been hitting this one, you can either angle your needle to go like this, really angle it underneath of everything and point it over this direction. And I guess you'd have to go over and then under and then point it like that, which would give you that direction. Oh, I just did that twice. Can we all just laugh about how I just accidentally went under that one twice and created a little knot over it? Okay. Yeah, so you're just working on making sure that you can find the angle that works best. And don't get too discouraged, it's not gonna be easy for everyone. So just take a deep breath when you get to that point and just go slow. Take your time, it will happen. If you're feeling like you're on having a lot of trouble with it and you're afraid you're gonna snag or pull it, one of my suggestions is I put my thumb over my woven wheel when I feel like I'm gonna have to pull on something or I'm kind of being a little rough with the thread or the needle. I put my thumb over the woven wheel and it kind of helps keep, if I was to pull on this, I'm not changing the tension of my woven wheel right now. If I was to let go and pull on that, I would destroy my whole woven wheel. So that's a tip too, if you need something to protect the woven wheel while you're trying to figure out the angle of the needle to try to get it past the other woven stitches. Whether that be the other woven wheel that you're going past. So here's what I was trying to show you. So this one is here. Let's pretend that my thumb is the other woven wheel and I need to get past that. I'm gonna be hitting it where I'm trying to pick up my needle. So in this case, I could either turn it in this direction so that I can get past my thumb, which is the other woven wheel, or I can turn it in this direction and put it over top of that spoke, underneath of this spoke, and try to pick it up and pull it out. So that we're pretending my thumb is that. So now and then we're going back over this one, and then you're gonna have to dig that one underneath. So hopefully that's giving you enough examples of how we're gonna do it. and then just following through. So I'm gonna keep going until I get to my outside, and then I'm gonna pick up and come back in a sec. Okay, so I'm pretty much at a point where I have gone around this with 2 full arms length of thread, and I'm kind of at the end where I'm ready to stitch and finish. So I just basically go under this last spoke and then through the last hole where I'm ready to be done, same way as I did at the bottom, and then tie off, underneath. I'm gonna go like this, okay, to try my knot. Trying not to pull too hard because I don't wanna mess up the backside, and then trim. And then if you feel like, oh wow, I can really still see the holes, after you finish the other woven wheels and everything is complete, you can yank a little bit on the outside of these to give them a nice fluff and to widen it, just so that you can cover any spokes that might be like still showing after you've, and then the other option is like, so if you're trying to do these 2 woven wheels, I would suggest giving yourself, like if you push that over there, even if it makes it look like that, then when you're done, you just pull it back. It might end up being a little messier than it would have had you left it, but my suggestion would be it's gonna look a lot less messy than if you hit it a bunch of times with your needle. So if you are finding that that's an issue, just like give it a good push over. Seems crazy, I know, but if you push it over and then you stitch in here, and then you're just gonna, as long as you do it with like a bit of like unison, like it's coming back pretty much almost exactly the same, and it looks great. It looks better than if you snag the other one. You snag it accidentally going through and you pull it all out like I just did there when I was trying to give an example. It's harder to fix that than it is to fix a intentional finger shove. All right, so hopefully that's helpful. If you are having a ton of issues, just message me and we'll talk it through. All right, so our next stitch is going to be the our straight stitches or back stitch. So we're just going to start at any point. You can use the spokes from your woven wheel to secure at the back, or just tie a large knot. And then you're basically just going to start going from hole to hole following the lines. It's pretty simple and self-explanatory. The one benefit of the way these holes are is you can actually save on thread by going up through a hole instead of with a back stitch where you always have to stitch backwards. As long as the hole, you haven't just gone down that hole, you can come up through it right after. So I'll try to explain what I mean. So in this case, I come up through this one and down through my hole here. And then normally I would have to jump all the way to here to do my back stitch. But because it's wood holes, I can go through this one right here and keep going. This one I need to jump forward to do the back stitch because I just went down through that hole. But you can save a little bit of thread by doing it that way. But yeah, so you're just gonna stitch basically from hole to hole along the lines. It's pretty simple and you should be able to pick this one up pretty quick. You just kind of connect in the dots. All right, so you'll do that for all of your straight lines in DMC 420, and then we can start on our leaves and our little leaves at the end. So I will meet you back. You know how by now to tie off at the back and how to start and stop a stitch. So we should be all good, and then hopefully you feel confident in this stitch. Okay, so next up, we're going to be working on our little leaf stitches, the small ones. There's a couple different variations depending on the hole configuration. So it's not made to confuse you, I promise. We'll go through a couple of them and hopefully you'll get an idea. And really, you just have to kind of use what I teach you. And it's the same as embroidery when you have a different shaped leaf than you would normally. You just have to kind of use the spaces and fill them in just based on what you know of how to do the stitch. So we're gonna start with a few. I'm gonna try to give you as many of the variations as possible. Some of them, where it differs per leaf is that some of them have more holes on the outside and more holes in the center than others. So this one here has 4 exterior holes and 3, because we're going to consider this base one, in the side, in the middle here. So sometimes basically this number along the side will match this number here, and then this one is always like your center. So some of them won't follow that guide. Some of them might have an extra one or less, but that's the general rule. So we start with our center stitch on all of them. You're going to start on your middle stitch. Going to pop over to your second stitch down, and we're just going to put in 1 stitch on each side. So kind of whatever you do on one side, you're going to do on the other side. It's just I'm ready to make sure I'm in the frame. That's just a general rule. Okay, so you've done your top, middle stitch, then you've done your side stitch, and then you're gonna do the same thing, and you're gonna just pop down 1 row. So you're gonna do your second side hole and your second middle hole. Pop down, and then you're gonna do the same for your third side hole and your third center hole. Oops, that's my middle hole. That's not the one I went for. Okay, so you're just starting with your first set of angled stitches. Now, if you're content with the way this looks, you can just pop your last stitch from here across the top to the bottom. You can frame out the sides and be done. But another alternative to fill it in even more is going back to your top side stitch and actually stitching down to your second middle stitch. I am getting caught on everything. Middle stitch, that fills in a little bit of the side gap or the center gaps to your second. So first hole on the side to your second hole on the center. And then you can repeat that pattern. First hole to second hole. And then obviously you don't have a third hole to fourth since that was your last one, but then you've done that all in, and then you can pop back up. The last stitch you probably want to do is your top stitch all the way to your bottom stitch. It just fills in that center line and really completes the leaf. So for example, on the side here, we've actually got 2 side stitches, but technically with the middle stitch in this bottom, you have 3. So I'm going to do my first stitch to the center. So you have you have more side stitches than center stitches, which is fine. Or you have more center stitches to side stitches. So you're gonna do your first 3 as your top and your 2 sides, as always, to your first hole. Okay, whoops, I'm gonna fix my needle. Okay, then we're gonna pop over to our second hole on the side and our second hole on the center. Same thing, continuing on, second hole to second hole. Sorry, I had to pause there. Okay, and then second hole to second hole. So then we've done those ones, and then you're gonna wanna do second hole to third hole because you don't have a third hole to third hole, but basically, if you look at the angle here, this line here can fill in that side stitch. So it was unnecessary to add another angle just because we had enough. So then second stitch to center hole. Oops, and I'm getting caught again. Okay. And then we're gonna pop back up to the top. So we've kind of already done our second hole here where we did like second hole to third hole. We already kind of went, so we're moving backwards a little bit in this one, if that makes sense. So like before we would have done third hole and then we would have done the second hole to center hole, but I can't find the hole. There we go. Okay, so now we're gonna do first hole to second hole. And then, oops, I am having trouble finding these holes today. Okay, there we go. And then first hole to second hole. So what I'm going to do here is I framed this one. So another option to fill in is to frame all of these. And which will be framing our large ones. And the little ones, it's kind of optional whether you frame them. You can either choose one or the other. For this one, I'm going to show you the framed option. And then you've filled in the center and you've outlined the sides, and you just creates like a tiny bit of a different look than this one, which was all. But if you are going to frame it, you can either start from the beginning, and I'll show how to do that, or you frame it at the end and then pop your last stitch. And I'm going to pop my last stitch from the top down to the center hole and leave it as framed. So we're going to frame this one now. Let's do the framing first. Okay. Popping all of my back stitches in. And we don't need to do the last one because that's going to be our last stitch here. So I'm going to go from my top center to my top middle, or sorry, my top leaf to my top center, side first hole to side, middle first hole, other side first hole to middle first hole, and then it's kind of like a, what's the word? I feel like it's almost like a math equation or like a puzzle you have to sort out. But here's the thing. I know that might seem confusing. There isn't necessarily a right or wrong way to fill it in. I'm showing you how I'm filling it in. You can do less or you can do more. We're just going to pop these two side ones in. And then I'm going to finish my outside and come down through my base hole. I try to find the outside there. Okay. And then one more. And then I'm out of thread. So I'm going to pop back in 1 second and finish. Done all of our first stitch to our first holes. Now I'm going to start back at my top second hole. Okay. And I'm going to go through how to do all of these with you, but I want you to also remember that you can take liberties and you can use visually to tell you where you need to do the next one. So in this case, I can see that I'm kind of have a gap right through here. So that would be first hole to second hole. So it's kind of like paint by numbers a little bit, not that there's a number there for you, but if you see a hole and you see a line, you can just follow it. But so then we're going to do, like I said, our second hole or first hole to second hole. Sorry, it's hard to get all these numbers right. I'm trying to say it for you because I know there's people who will hear it and understand better, and I'm trying to show it to you. Okay, so we've done our second hole, or first hole to second hole. I keep messing it up. And the side ones, which we went from one to the other. So you won't do, since we only had 2 holes, just like the other one, you won't do a second to second. And for this one, I could go all the way to the base. There should be enough space to pull that through. But if it's feeling too tight, you can just pop it through for the last stitch through the center. And sorry, mine's not, there's one underneath that's not sitting as nicely. It's creating a bump. Okay, so then you've filled out your second leaf. Okay, and you can kind of like move your stitches around if you feel like you want to like separate the strands a little bit to fill it in, but you don't have to do that. That's just what I'm doing there, if that makes sense. Okay, so we've got another little leaf. We're gonna do our littlest ones here. And we're gonna go from center hole to center hole. This one has 2 side holes and only 2 center holes. So this would be first hole to first hole, top hole to first hole, and then first side hole to first side hole to first middle hole. Then you're gonna go second side hole to second middle hole. I'm hooked again. Second side hole to second center hole. Oh my gosh, I want to count how many times I get hooked on here. Okay, then, like we've done before, we're going back up. And you could probably just do one straight stitch and finish it off, and you would fill in this gap here and you would be done, and you could have done your side stitches. I personally prefer it without the side stitches, but I wanted to give the option for everybody to do the side stitches or the straight and the straight, just because everybody has a little bit of a different visual look that they're going for. And there is enough thread for you to do it that way. And because you're not doing it on a fabric and the holes are pre-cut for you, I wanted to give you all of the options. Whereas if you were on fabric, you could take your own liberties. So I'm just giving you suggestions for additional options. So here, I'm gonna do my final stitch there. And then you can see, like, it looks just like a full leaf. So for this little guy, we're gonna start with our top, center, to center, center. And then we're going side, center, to center, center. And then side, center, side first to center first. And then I'm gonna go back on this side. Oops, I can't get my hole. Oh, there we go. That took forever. Okay, and then the way that this one is designed, you're gonna go from this hole all the way across to this one at the bottom here. Okay. And then you're gonna go from this one. Oh my gosh, why can't I find the back? There we go, almost, there we go. Okay, and then this one is your second hole to right here. And then from center to hole. So I don't want you to get confused because of this hole here, because guess what, I just did that. But this leaf goes to this middle hole and this leaf goes to this hole here. So then we'll pop over to this guy here and do the same thing. Center hole, first side hole to center hole. And then second, oh, I lost my needle. Second side hole to center hole. And then first side hole back to second. And then you can see that it's all filled in there. Didn't take much on these little ones. So I'm not even gonna do a second center one. You could if you want to, but I think it's pretty well filled in there. Okay, so our last tutorial is for our large leaves. And they're pretty simple, to be honest. They're my favorite, and I love the way they come out. So we're just gonna get started. I'm gonna start with this guy down here, and I'm gonna show you this one. They are all very similar, but of course they're gonna be a little bit different, just like we did with the other ones, but they follow the same technique. So we're gonna start at that center hole at the top, going down to our first middle hole. So I'm gonna call these ones on the outside our outer holes, and these ones are middle holes. So we're gonna do for our center outer hole to our top middle hole. Then we're gonna go on the sides, and we're gonna go down the same top hole for the two first side holes. So the top middle hole takes 3 different stitches into it from the 2 sides, and then your added one is this one here. I'm gonna get hooked on this thing a million times, okay? And then you're gonna go down and do your second layer, or your second side stitch to your second center hole, middle hole. And then same thing on this side, so it's matching from one side to the other. So you'll get, it will match up on each side. Oops, I'm lost. Okay, for almost all of them, you'll have a matching like pair, but just remember that some of them are oddly shaped. So if you have more or less on one side on specific leaves, that would be similar to when you're stitching on like an actual leaf on fabric too. Sometimes you're gonna need more stitches on one side. You just compensate for that by using whatever hole falls on the right angle. So we'll try to give you some examples of that, but just keep that in mind if you're starting on a different leaf. Oops. Okay, so then this one to here. And you can adjust and tweak, like if you want to do different holes to different holes, there is no right or wrong. This is just how I did it. Okay, and then you're gonna come down to the center one. Now be careful because you could, if you're nicking this woven wheel, you could kind of mess up a little bit of the tension on the wheel. So just be cautious when you're coming down through that one, that you're trying to make sure that you're not going through the white thread. Okay, and then this one follows, like you're gonna go and do a second layer of stitches, filling in any gaps that you can see where you might find it valuable to fill in. So like right here's a good example. Right here, there's a big gap here. So we're gonna go from here down to the second hole. And you can do that on all of them, or you can go through and just look at the ones where you see a gap. Like there's not as big of a gap right here, but there is still one. So I did it for all of them. So we'll start back at the top, and you're gonna start with your top hole. And instead of going down through the first hole like we did at the beginning, you're gonna go down the second hole. So you follow that principle for all of them. So just following that gap and just dropping it down to the next hole. It just creates a slightly different angle, which then fills in. So then you can, to save floss, you can actually just come like you just went down through this one. You're right there. You could come up through this one, or you could start back up at the top if it keeps you more organized. So I did this one. Now I'm gonna do the second one down to the third down middle hole. From the third middle hole to the second. So you're just going, instead of second to second, you're going second to third. And then I'll jump over here. Second to third. And if you're having trouble like organizing your thoughts on that, you can just look and see that this one went from here to this hole. So I'm gonna go from here to this hole. And it's just doing the next one down from the hole you did previously. And you can leave it without doing this second layer if you like that. If you want to fill in the gaps, you can. If you know, it's always going to be at your own discretion. Nothing is like has to be the way I've done it here. So you're going to go down to that middle one, doing the same thing. It's hard to find the hole from the back. Okay, and then this one you won't see much of it, but that's okay. Gonna get the last one in there, okay? And then you'll see there's 2 holes on the side. That is for your framing back stitch. So I'm just gonna start down. Oh, if I can find the hole again. Let's just flip it over and make it easier. Okay, so we're just gonna frame the outside. This is the hardest part for me. I don't know why once the holes are full, I find it harder to find the right one. Okay, so we're doing the outline all the way around. And if you, once you're done stitching, I like to fluff up my rows to kind of cover the base of it, but okay. And all the way around, you'll do the back stitch. I'm just gonna let you do that on your own. It's pretty self-explanatory. So the last stitch that you'll do is from the very top hole straight down. And you can either, if you're finding that you're struggling to get through this hole, you shouldn't, it should be big enough. But if for some reason you're feeling like it's not, you could go through the second last one. But on this case, we're gonna go through this one, and then it fills in and it covers all of where those stitches meet, creating like a really seamless look. I just wanted to show that if you were looking at what was next on that. So just filling in my outline back stitch. And then I'll just quickly talk about some of the other ones. For example, like this one here. So you've got your 3 middle, then this one's gonna go down to here, this one's gonna go down to here, this one to here, this one to here, this one to here, and then you've got 2 more stitches here. You can add and go through this one here again, or you can just start framing. You can do 1 there and then a side stitch, and because on the other side you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6, and you're going to have the same thing on this side. But on this side, you have more of a gap there, so I would recommend going through this hole. On this side, you won't have as much of a gap. So to save this hole from being too full, I would recommend doing extra stitch on this side and just doing a up and down stitch there. So if we want, I'll do that one on video right now for you. If you feel confident to be able to figure it out on your own, you can. But like I said, they're not always going to be even. Like we have extra holes here that you'll use the base hole more than once instead of having one side hole for every center hole. So I'll do this one if you want to stay on, and if you want to just get going and come back if you're having any trouble, you can. But just remembering that they're not always going to be identical. You'll have to use the same hole more than once sometimes to make them all fit. Okay, so we're going to follow the same principles as before. We're going to start at our top, center, go down. Oops. Lost my needle on my, thought it was going through the hole. It got stuck to my finger. Okay, so down to right there. And then the same where the first 3 use the same. I am just going to be stuck this whole time. It's one of those things where when you get stuck on the side of the wood, you have to just laugh about it, because if you don't, it'll drive you nuts. It's like the top of an embroidery hoop, how when you get looped on there and how common that is. That's like the entire thing on these wood is getting hooked on those. And there, I thought I flipped it to the spot where it wouldn't, and it did anyways. Okay. So this one you can see is a little different than the last one because it's definitely like wider gaps between each stitch. So you'll see more value from that second stitch to second stitch, or first stitch to second hole on the center stage. But we're just doing our little connect the dots right now. And now we're already at that center hole. So on this side, on each side I have 1 extra hole. So like I said, on this side, you can see what I'm saying about how this one, like to go to that hole you could, but realistically just a side stitch here, like you're only left with this little gap. I would wait until you're at the very end to see if you have enough room in this hole to make that last stitch from here, or sorry, from here to here. I wouldn't want to fill up that center hole if you end up with too many stitches in it. That's just my personal, like I don't like to try to pull it through when I put too many stitches in there. So we're gonna give ourselves a little bit of extra room in there by just like leaving it for now. So The next one you're going to do is your second hole to first hole, or first hole to second hole. So you can start up here, and we'll do this one to this one. I'm going to do one side. No, I'm going to do both sides at the same time. I was going to try a different plan, but I am going to drop down to this one and come back up. It's just going to be more efficient, I find, in your floss. So dropping down one. When you're like at that center hole, you can just come up from here. And you can really kind of see where you need to go because you can see the gaps. If that makes sense, like you can see the hole kind of where it needs to be filled. And then going to here. And then down to our next one. I'm going to pop over here and do that one there. And then from the center hole, just going up to the one above the last one, and then over and back down through that one. So you wanna, the next thing you would do is your, the next thing you'll do is your outline and then your center stitch. So we can start with either, like if you can do your center stitch first or you can do your outline, but we'll do our outline. And I'll need a little bit more floss, and then I'll come back and finish this out. Okay, so we're finishing off our back stitch. You can finish that back stitch and to do that center stitch and you're done, or you can keep following along with me. Almost finished with our outline, and then we can jump back over to here and throw in our center stitch. And then I like to sometimes give it like a little fluff up, and the same thing with these. I like to like spread them out a little bit so that it helps fill in any of those gaps. So just kind of like giving it a little spread out so that the strands spread out, and then it fills it in a little bit more. And you can do the same thing with the center stitch too, or you could add an extra one. Like if you were like, I want it to be a little bit thicker there, you could add a second straight stitch down the center, although I'm running out of space at my bottom. And then it just makes it a little thicker. So you are able to do whatever you want to do to fill in any of like the spaces. You can add extra stitches if you see somewhere where you think that you could add a stitch that might be of value to fill in any of the blank spaces. But that would just be added bonuses. This is the method to design to the proper, what I used. It's not proper because you can do it however you want, but that's what I used when I did what hole I went to from where. So you can do it however you'd like to make it look however you like the best. So that is all of your instructions for this kit. You have hopefully been able to see everything you needed to see to get comfortable with the method of how to fill in all these holes. And just remember that You can always do things a little bit differently than how I did them. It may end up being better than mine. It may end up just being different. It may end up being something you like better. And that is totally your prerogative. And don't get too hung up on what I did as far as which hole to which hole. If you like something better, take those creative liberties and don't be afraid to make it your own. All right, so the next thing I wanted to go over is what your options are for how to finish the back of your hoop, your wood embroidery. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is obviously go into the back here and just like trim up as much as you possibly can, trimming all those little ends, just getting it to like be as clean as possible. It doesn't have to look good back here. That I would have told you that at the beginning if it had to, it does not. So just trimming things up, especially the ones sort of around the edge on the outside. And then you have two options, and this was included in your kit. So you can just take this and I either recommend using hot glue. That's what I used for mine. Or if you don't have hot glue gun, you could just stitch this on to attach the back. And then you can hang your butterfly on the wall anywhere you'd like. That's a really good option. If you want to display it somewhere where maybe you want it like sitting on a shelf and it's on like a small little stand or something like this, you can buy like the little plate stands at lots of places. The dollar store even has them, and you could display it on a shelf. You may want to put something on the back to kind of finish it off. My recommendation would just be either like a piece of felt, or you could maybe find like even a piece of cardstock just to like cover the back, but you would just trace out your shape. I would recommend not necessarily tracing out this just because there isn't anything there. So I would just do like a little line here and and then cut it out a little bit smaller than your butterfly. And then you just glue it to the back, hot glue. You could like secure it with a couple stitches if you wanted to, if you didn't have a hot glue gun, but I would recommend if you're using something to attach to the back, you use a glue gun. And yeah, just adding a couple little dabs of glue over where your stitches are, trying to avoid anywhere where there's a hole where the glue can come through. So just maybe like on a few spots, and then just glue it on and you are all finished. So it was designed for you to just glue on or stitch on your little hanger and then hang it on the wall. So you can choose what works best for you, but I can't wait to see it. Please tag me in any photos of you displaying it if you get a chance. Thanks.